Peter Robnson isn't able to join us live on Sunday Politics this morning, but immediately after his speech yesterday, he did talk to me. I started off by asking him about the forthcoming European election. As we heard in Martina's report there, the party still has to decide if it will run a second candidate alongside its current MEP, Diane Dodds. I put it to Mr Robnson that running another DUP candidate is potentially a very risky strategy.
There are strong voices within the party, it has to be said, who want us to put in a second candidate. For me, it has to always be about whether we can win 2 seats for unionism. Have we a better opportunity if it's 2 Democratic Unionist candidates, or should we allow the other parties to try and put a candidate forward? And will there be sufficient votes to get that candidate in rather than another nationalist or Republican getting elected? And over the next number of weeks and months, we'll talk to the psephologists within our party and to colleagues to see what the best strategy would be.
Do you accept, though, that it is risky? Because the potential is there for you, with the second candidate, to further shred the Unionist vote and perhaps restrict Unionist representation to 1 seat and allow the SDLP and Sinn Féin to take the other 2 seats. That has to be a real risk.
Yeah, that's a risk on one side, and the risk on the other side is the last opinion polls show that the Ulster Unionist Party was down to 10% of the poll. You need 25% of the poll to get a European seat. So do we risk leaving it that the Ulster Unionists are capable of winning a seat in Europe, or do we have to take a decision ourselves to run the second one? So there's a risk whichever way we do it, and we want to make sure that we take whatever is the most likely outcome to get 2 Unionists returned.
You said today unionism is at its best when it's open and inviting, not narrow and exclusive. Do you think there might be some people in the DUP, perhaps in the body of the whole, listening to your speech today, who frankly either don't know what you mean by that or might even disagree with you?
Well, I think there's very few who will not know what I mean. I think that the issue, of course, is that we've come from a very difficult and entrenched position. We've come through decades of violence in Northern Ireland. And therefore it is difficult for people to leave behind them the baggage of those difficult years and to be forward and embracing and encouraging. But I think that's the way forward for Northern Ireland. I think the last decade has shown that. From opinion polls that had 1/3 of the community or more wanting to have a united Ireland, Sinn Féin could barely get a majority of its own support base wanting to have a united Ireland. So people want to remain within the United Kingdom. That allows us to look at a wider horizon.
You were very clear earlier in the week that the Attorney-General John Larkin was wrong to raise the debate, suggesting that a line could be drawn under pre-1998 Troubles-related crimes. Is it not the case, though, that politicians are at risk here of allowing victims to be the arbiters of important public policy? And what John Larkin was doing was at least allowing space for a serious debate to take place.
Well, I think before anybody wants to come and commentate on those matters, they should do the kind of thing that I just did a number of days ago. I went down and spoke to the victims of Castlederg, and here we were 10, 20, 30, 40 years after some of them had lost their loved ones, and the tears were still flowing. They were still hurting. They still felt that people weren't giving them the justice or the truth that they needed. So I believe that we do need to have a victims-centred approach to the future. That doesn't mean that we all stay back and do nothing. It means that we bring victims along, allow them to be the centre of our progress in Northern Ireland, but to recognise the very real hurt that they have and the entitlement that they have to keep open the hope that ultimately justice will be done.
How do you think you can realise your vision for a more inclusive society when the relationship, which is at the heart of the executive, at the heart of government here, between Sinn Féin and the DUP, looks so very toxic at the moment?
Well, I think that there's a tendency on the part of the press and media to accentuate any difficulty that we have within the process. You know, we have taken almost 1,000 decisions as an executive. There's only a handful of those that have ever caused division within the executive. But that's a handful that you guys are always concentrating on, instead of showing all the positive things that are done, all the agreements that we reach, all the achievements that we have made, the progress that's there. So let's get our priorities right. Let's get some perspective on what we're doing. The executive is very successful. The executive is delivering. And I hope that the BBC, amongst others, will be prepared to to publish the kind of list that the Democratic Unionist Party has published today, to let people see what has been achieved in their name and to show that not only the DUP but the executive as a whole is delivering.
Well, some of that might indeed be the case, but with respect, isn't it a fact that, the disagreements between you and Martin McGuinness and others within the executive tend to be about very important fundamental issues, and that's why people are so interested in them and how you intend to resolve them. I mean, that's the problem. You can't just wish that away.
Yeah, well, when we take 1,000 decisions and you find a difficulty with one or two, I think the first thing that you need to have is some focus on the successes that we have. You never mention them. You just move on to the areas where there are problems. Of course there are problems. We come from very different backgrounds. We've had decades of division and conflict in Northern Ireland. So of course there are difficulties to be overcome. But the one thing that we consistently do is that where there are difficulties, we keep on working at them until we can resolve those difficulties.
Yeah, well, let's look
at
some of those key issues like flags, parades in the past. With the greatest respect to you, it wasn't the media who invited Richard Haas to come and sort it out. It was you and Martin McGuinness.
And why did we do it? Because, as I have indicated, where there are real problems, we keep at those issues. We had a whole raft of matters contained within our good relations strategy. We agreed everything in our good relations strategy with the exception of those three issues. Did we leave them and say we can't succeed in getting these matters resolved? No, we didn't. We said, let's see if we can bring outside facilitation to help and narrow the areas of difference once more. So we continue to work at those matters that are outstanding, and that's the way forward in Northern Ireland, to recognise where there are difficulties, but to keep working to try and resolve them.
Just a final thought about next week's flag protest in the centre of Belfast. What is your definitive position a week out from that on what should happen and what the pitfalls potentially are for people taking part?
Well, I think we passed the stage because the Parades Commission have already indicated that they're giving permission for the parade. All that I ask the organisers to do, and as people who want to see Northern Ireland succeeding, who won't want to damage the Northern Ireland economy, I ask them to carry out that protest. And it is a legitimate right of people to protest, to show that 1 year on that they are still opposed to the flag's decision of Belfast City Council. But I ask them to have their protest in a way that does the least possible damage to the traders of Belfast.
You looked like you were enjoying yourself during that speech today. Commentators might say you've had a tough time over the last year or two. Do you think you're back on top of your game? Well,
the party has always been supported. I think that there's a tendency on the part of the media to look at the Democratic Unionist Party as if it's just any other political party. It's not. It is a very special creation. It is a family much more than it is a political party. You don't have the backstabbing and so forth that you have in other political parties. There's always support. We have a very good relationship. The very fact that I'm elected unanimously by the MPs, the MEP and the Assembly members, endorsed unanimously by our executive, shows the degree of support there is and the collective and unity of purpose that there is within the party as a whole.
Peter Robnson talking to me yesterday.